Welcome everyone to Cafe Better Sports. We're here again with Gabriel, who's going to give us more tips on the Fantasy Premier League and how we should play. Obviously, everyone knows by now that we've got Premier Fantasies, the league that we are playing, and Gabriel is part of our panel on the Premier League, the Premier Fantasies show, the football show that we have. Welcome again, Gabriel. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. And I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing?
I can't complain. Really excited about the game week that we've had, but also even more excited about what's to come. Today, I want us to chat a little bit about how you build a strong defense in your Fantasy Premier League. Obviously, Fantasy Premier League team, sorry. Obviously, you know that defense is a big thing in your team, because if you drop in terms of your defensive strategy, you lose a lot of points. And we've seen that happen where, players have been red carded, or players that
Mm.
did not keep a clean sheet, and you lose points because of that. So today we want to talk on how you structure your team, your defense team, and how you put your defense strategy together to get you ahead in this game. So what are your top tips?
Defending is very tricky, particularly now in the Premier League. The game has changed, and there aren't any defenders, or there's very few defenders I can say with the same stature, the same ability as your defenders of old, as your Rio Ferdinand, as your John Terry. If those guys are playing, you know that you're going to get a clean sheet. So that's extremely difficult nowadays. So one of my main tips is to choose defenders who play primarily as fullbacks. We know, again, like I said, the game has changed. So instead of looking for clean sheets in a defender, try and look for a defender who's going to be giving you an attacking output as well as clean sheets. So
Yeah.
sort of look as clean sheets as a bonus. And just for reference as well, the most amount of goals scored in a Premier League weekend was in 1993, I believe. It was even before I was
27 years
born.
ago.
This was
Wow.
this was
I
May
was
of
here.
1993, before I was born.
I was here.
And, it was in an era where the Premier League still had 22 teams. And the most amount of goals scored was 53 over that entire weekend. So
Wow.
after that, when the Premier League was restructured in 1995 to 20 teams, the most amount of goals scored came in February of 2011, and that was 43 goals that were scored over the entire weekend. And this weekend had beaten that record. So
Right.
over this weekend, over in the Premier League era of 20 teams, there were the most amounts of goals scored ever in the Premier League era at 44 goals, which
It's
is
fantastic.
madness. It's a
Mm.
lot, and that just speaks to how difficult it is to keep a clean sheet. And of the 10 matches that happened, only 3 teams got clean sheets.
Yeah.
So it was Liverpool against Chelsea, it was Aston Villa against Sheffield, and it was Brighton against Newcastle. Now,
Mm.
in those games as well, moving forward, a lot of the teams, or a lot of the goals that were scored, there were defenders that contributed, mostly fullbacks. And
Right.
that's something that you need to really look at in terms of getting some of those defenders into your team as well.
Mm. Mm. And if I'm not mistaken, there were two games in which 7 goals were scored
I do
holistically.
believe there was the Tottenham. Yes, the Tottenham game was 5-2, and
Mm-hmm.
Leeds against Fulham, it was 4-3, that game as well.
Yeah.
So just goals galore going through.
Correct. And I think in the Leeds game there was assistance by a defender, just to add on to that point.
Yeah, yeah. So it's crucial as well that you start looking, because that's the way the game is played now. You're gonna have wide fullbacks or wide defenders, and they're gonna try their best to contribute 2 goals. For
Mm-hmm.
example, to Lamptey. He was fouled in the box, and so when the penalty was taken for Neil Maupay scored the penalty, Lamptey gets the assist. So anybody who
Mm.
gets fouled is automatically given the assist in FPL for penalties. So
Right.
that's an example of an attacking output given by a defender on top of the clean sheet that Brighton did secure against Newcastle.
So in last season, we had Trent Alexander-Arnold, who did very well as a defender in terms of creating chances and scoring goals, as well as Robertson, if I'm not mistaken. Virgil van Dijk has also got a long history of doing that. But obviously, it is impossible to constantly be picking Liverpool players.
Yeah.
So in this season, what are the kind of players, or who are the kind of players that we're looking at other than just the Liverpool squad?
So you want to be very careful with some of the defenders that you go for. And I think that one of the very important things to go for when it comes to that would be looking at goalkeepers as well. So whereas last season we had Sheffield United defenders who were fantastic. They were extremely good. And even myself, I would have loved to put in John Egan or George Basham in the team. But one of the key reasons why that Sheffield United defense was as good as they were was the fact that they had Dean Henderson in goal. But Dean Henderson's loan spell ended and he returned to Manchester United. And that's the reason why I opted against having Sheffield United defenders, despite them being very good last season. And I mean, it showed in the game against Aston Villa, for example. John Egan got a red card. I mean, you can't predict these things, but it is one of those things that does happen, and it was the correct decision. And Ramsdale, I don't believe, is as good a goalkeeper as Dean Henderson quite yet. And as such, perhaps the Sheffield United defenders are the ones you want to shy away from for the moment until they get into the groove of things or whatnot. Whereas teams with good goalkeepers, so Alisson Becker, like it's difficult not to mention Liverpool, but he had a clean sheet against Chelsea. Then you have Emi Martinez, who moved from Arsenal to Aston Villa. He's a
Yes, he's
fantastic
been
goalkeeper.
brilliant.
He is an incredible goalkeeper. So looking at some Aston Villa defenders as well might be a positive. You have the Edison Moraes of Manchester City. So, of course, the City defenders will naturally be priced a little bit higher, but you can also be sure that they will guarantee certain clean sheets, as Edison was the Golden Glove winner of last season. So in terms of selections, those are the ones you're looking for. But my personal opinion on that is selecting a team with a good goalkeeper, but also going for your fullbacks, because we know that the fullbacks will contribute to something a little extra outside of just your clean sheets.
Yeah, there are some anomalies in terms of defenders, and when I think of one, I think of Kyle Walker, who is very fast. So he feeds the ball to the front, but lacks in certain areas. Another defender who I find an anomaly is Serge Aurier, because he is really good defensively, but on top of that, he's extremely reckless. So that being said, what players do you not go for? What kind of defenders do you want to shy away from?
Exactly what you've just mentioned. So reckless defenders, like you said, Serge Aurier is one of them. Maybe shy away from him. You've got Eric Bailly of Man United. Not only is he not a consistent starter, which is also another thing. Defenders that aren't consistent starters maybe shy away from, but also defenders that have a history of recklessness. So, for example, as good as Sergio Ramos is, if he had to be in the Premier League, you don't want him. I believe he's got the most red cards in the history of La Liga, or some crazy stat like that. So maybe if some a defender like that you want to shy away from. But also watching the game, you also want to see which defender perhaps contributes the most. So using Liverpool as an example, between Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez, we're going to leave aside the fullbacks for the moment, but between Virgil and Joe Gomez, which one would you want to go for? Probably Virgil van Dijk, because of his ability in the air. And you know that Joe Gomez doesn't necessarily do much in the air, so perhaps shy away from him. Looking at Man United, same thing. Harry Maguire versus Victor Lindelof. If you see during set pieces, Harry Maguire is always in the box ready to attack the header, whereas Victor Lindelof, he's always one of the back two defenders in case there's a break on the counter from a corner taken wrong. So maybe Victor Lindelof is also a defender that you want to shy away from because he's not contributing to all too much outside of perhaps a clean sheet for the club. So in terms of that, maybe look at the main, the defender who's the main, how can I put it, who's the main source of attack, perhaps between, in a choice between two or between three, and then shy away from those who aren't going to contribute to anything outside of something defensive.
In terms of trends, there's a bit of consistency in the last two games with certain defenders. Who do you believe would be your top five defenders going into game week 3 and 4 and 5, considering that we don't want to make a lot of changes while it's so early in the game?
Yeah. So a couple of differentials as well, which I believe I can start with, and then going to the more known ones. Tariq Lamptey. He is a fantastic right back. He moves forward. He's a very good defender as well, and he's only 19 years old, so he's energetic. He's fit. He's somebody definitely to look at, and he's contributed to Brighton's success as of late. He's really stuck into the team, so he's somebody that I believe that you can look at. Perhaps in Brighton's side as well, Lewis Dunk, the captain. He is big, he's strong, he attacks the headers, he has scored a few goals for them last season as well. So he's somebody that you can look for as well. I do believe that he also takes certain set pieces. If I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, but that's also something that you can look at as a defender. So he can bring in more points for something like that. That's in terms of Brighton's side of things. Then you can't shy away from Liverpool. I think that either or between Trent and Robbo is a good option. Both of them do. Trent obviously was the higher point scorer last season, but both of them contribute the same amount to attack as each other. It's just Trent has been a little bit more clinical than Robertson in that aspect. So either or, one of those two, they're also very, very good options to have. I believe another differential, Kyle Walker-Peters of Southampton.
Yeah.
I think he might be a very good option to look at as well. Also somebody who will contribute to a lot of points in terms of Southampton pushing up and maybe getting a few crosses in that Danny Ings might get to behind. So that's Kyle Walker-Peters as well. Also young, also fit, also somebody very energetic. So he will push up, he will go back, he will do the job. And then the last also an either or situation will be the Leicester City fullbacks. So that's Castagne or James Justin. And I believe that both of them have been fantastic up till now. James Justin has been looked at since, I believe it is Pereira who's injured. I believe it's Pereira, if I'm not mistaken. So he's injured, and Ben Chilwell having left. So those are the guys to look at. And with Brendan Rodgers' style of play, you know that these guys are definitely going to push up. And if they're able to keep a clean sheet and perhaps get an assist or a goal in, as was the case over the weekend, then those are definite points that you're going to be getting from your defenders.
Should we be nervous and start using things like wild cards in terms of getting the right defenders on, or should we solely phase the ones who are not doing well out? What would you suggest?
I think that entirely depends on you. Personally, I try and hold the wild card as long as possible so that they can be used in situations of perhaps double game weeks or in situations where there are less teams playing in a game week than usual, things like that. But at the end of the day, you still want to maximize your points every week or as many weeks as possible. So you need to look at it over the long run. So if you think that your defenders are going to do bad for a period of 5 or 6 game weeks, until you plan to use your wild card, perhaps use your wild card a little bit earlier and then get your points over those game weeks and then adjust your strategy, because you'll have some time to adjust your strategy until a time comes where you need to move this defender or whatnot. So it is entirely up to you. I think that a very good point in seeing when a wild card will be necessary will be about game week 4 or 5.
Right.
From then you'll see already the way teams play, where certain things are going, and you'll be able to decide, okay, this guy's not going to do well for me, so he needs to go, he needs to kick it.
Yeah.
Let me use a wild card because I don't want to spend minus 12 points to get
Of
these
course.
guys out. I'll rather use a wild card and spend minus 12 points if need be later on in the season.
Yeah. I remembered a question which I had meant to ask you. In terms of defensive midfielders, do you think that they can support your team at the back there?
Ooh, I think that the way you look at defensive midfielders, they're not very good fantasy Premier League assets as
Right.
a whole. So one way to look at your defensive midfielder is how good they are in your team structure, and that will give you a good idea of which defenders that you'll want to pick. So I mentioned again Manchester City. You saw the way they played against Wolves. It was a fantastic goal by Raul Jimenez. Great play by my brother and I were arguing about how to pronounce his surname, and now I've forgotten how to say his name. Daniel Pedence. That's who it was. The
I
name just
can't.
escaped me,
It's
but
there's another player who does that to me. I can't remember who it was, but every time I have to
oh, there's
pronounce his
so
name, I just
many.
like,
Yeah, exactly. So Daniel Pedence, it just escaped me, but for example, that was great play by him for Wolves to score the goal. But if you had watched the game, especially the first half, Manchester City looked almost impenetrable. And
yeah.
that is because they had Rodri and Fernandinho playing as holding midfielders. Now, as FPL assets, that's not really going to help you. Perhaps maybe the one extra point from clean sheets that you get for having them as midfielders. But in terms of your defenders, you can be sure that those guys will be the reason why perhaps your team will have a clean sheet. And that's a way to look at your defensive midfielders as FPL assets.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Gabriel. I think the information that you've given us is really, really insightful, and I think we'll be able to use it to our advantage going into game week 3. Is there any defender that you can just pull out of the hat to say, it's a definite, you must always have, or you must have, particularly in game week 3? Just one.
Whew. Also a very difficult one. But if you must have a defender, especially particularly game week 3, after the performance that they had against Chelsea, you have to have Trent. You
Yeah.
must have him. I think that it's there's no question about it.
Yeah.
On set pieces, on certain corners, and just his attacking prowess, along with having a solid defensive line. I think Trent Alexander is your guy to go to.
All right. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful evening, Gabriel, and I hope we can rely on you for
Thank
some
you.
more top tips.
I'm hoping that my tips will be helpful in the long run. As I said, it is a game of chance, but let's hope that my insight will be helpful too.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for watching once more. If you need to get more tips, any questions that you might have for our panel or for anyone in our panel, go to the comment section, put your comment in, and then we will create that content for you. But in the meantime, like, share, comment, and join the fun on our league code MAHL4P. Join us again. We will see you guys on Friday in our post-mortem of game week 2 and our looking forward to game week 3. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Goodbye.